One of the projects I was particularly excited about was the video poem, as I felt as though I had a better idea of how not to be quite so literal and also to convey the ideas of a poem than I had in the previous semester. I also felt as though I had a better understanding of Camtasia and how to make things more visually appealing for both myself and the audience, though that's not to say that I don't want to keep exploring Camtasia. For the EPoem, I picked a poem that I had previously explored and really connected with in another English class I had taken in a previous semester. The poem was called Lament. It had captivated me from the time we first read it, even though it was written many centuries ago. I felt deeply connected with the author, as it reminded me of a relationship I had been in where I felt trapped, much like the narrator describes. This personal connection definitely painted the view I had of the poem and the images that I ended up selecting for my video poem. To begin the assignment, I met with my professor, who introduced me to the poem. I had her read the poem aloud, and I wrote down all of the images that I immediately associated with the poem, and the particular stanzas that correlated, as you can see on this Word documented. I noticed, however, that many of the images were still rather literal, much like the first semester I had done, even when I tried to branch out or do something new. Some of the ideas, though, were not so literal, like my idea to incorporate the plane flying in during the last stanza. However, I never felt like the connection I had with the poem when I produced this first and unpublished draft was there, so I scrapped the entire project and decided to set out on this process again. This is where my better ideas came out. I closed my eyes as I listened to her read it again, and I imagined the scene, which gave me my truly best ideas. The poem implicitly discusses the pain and loneliness that the narrator experiences because she feels as though she does not belong, which made me think of images of the snow and bitter cold. Deciding which images was tricky, but I knew I wanted it to feel as though everything was overall very isolated and not much of a cluster of winter, if that makes sense. I really liked this, and so therefore I tried to capture this narrator's pain through the imagery of the noose originally, and I felt as though it was missing something, so I decided to explore it further. I added the overlay of a dandelion being blown out, and I decided that I didn't really like how there was the green background. I felt like it did not fit the scene. Therefore, I removed the color from the image to convey the loss of hope that I felt was permeating throughout the poem. The last imagery is perhaps one of the ones that I am most proud of. I really thought about using a yellow bird, but I thought that would be so literal and also very boring. Therefore, I chose to pick the woman dancing, and this last imagery reminded me that it's important to not always be so blatant, and that sometimes subtle imagery can be just as effective. I felt as though hearing the poem and solely thinking about the images allowed me to connect my emotions and create the most coherent thoughts that I had about this poem. The final production I have of this is probably the proudest I have ever felt doing a project, and I am excited to share it with my professor who very first introduced me to the poem.